One of the things that it's really important to understand is that everything that we do in life shapes us in some way. Our experiences get planted in our brain, and then our brain learns from them and changes the way that we interact with the world. So one of the things that it's really important for gamers to understand is, how does playing games shape the person that you are? What does playing games teach your brain? And then how does your brain use that information or that knowledge from playing games and approach the real world? So one of the things that I think it's really important for gamers to understand is that they're very good close-ended problem solvers. And I think this is a big problem for a lot of gamers, is that they're good at a certain kind of problem solving, but playing a lot of games actually puts them in the direction or makes them better at a certain kind of problem solving, and actually makes them worse at a different kind of problem solving, which I call open-ended problem solving. So I guess the first question is, what do I mean by close-ended problem solving and open-ended problem solving? So let's think a little bit about what happens within a game. In a game, we have a particular objective, and we're given a set of tools or assets. Like, you have a character has certain kinds of abilities, or if you're playing something like an RPG, you have a team of characters. If you're playing like a game like NHL or a football game or something like that, you've got a team of different assets. And you have to figure out how to use that team of people or that group of assets to accomplish a certain objective. If you think about a game, there's a particular goal, and you're sort of given a particular set of rules, and you have to use that set of rules to achieve that goal. If you're playing Mario, for example, you can't open a lemonade stand. It's just not something that you can do in the game. If you're playing World of Warcraft, you can't build a spaceship. There are certain limits that the game provides us with, and gamers are really good at coming up with an optimal solution if they're given a particular sandbox to work in. So I'll give you guys a prime example. About a year ago, I was taking this class at Harvard Business School called Value-Based Healthcare. This was a class that was for a bunch of physicians who were sort of trying to learn the business side of medicine. And in this class, we did these cases. So what happens in the class is they give you like this 20 or 30-page case. And this case was about optimizing flow through a urology office. So when a patient goes to see a urologist, they get checked in by the receptionist, they have to fill in some paperwork, they get taken to a room, they see a nurse for a little while, and then the doctor comes in, the doctor does a procedure, and then the patient kind of goes to a different room where they get monitored for a little while, and then they get checked out by the receptionist, they pay their bill, and they leave. So there's a certain flow through the office. And this case was all about, how can we optimize the flow through the office to sort of create the most value? And how can we sort of make it so that we're getting the most bang out of our buck? And so one of the things that I was kind of surprised about is, I was working with a couple of gamers at the time, and I actually sort of told them about the case. And I said, so here's the scenario. We've got this urologist office. We have 3 urologists. We've got 5 nurses. We've got 2 receptionists. How can you optimize the flow through the office so that the most patients get seen in the shortest amount of time? And my gamer friends that I was kind of talking about this with came up with a couple of solutions, and then I went into class the next day, and when people were asking about how you go about doing things, I offered those solutions, and it turned out that those were some of the best solutions in the class. I was a little bit surprised by this, because here's a group of people, and this class was offered for only, it was at Harvard Business School and offered to Harvard physician trainees, so arguably some of the brightest people in the country. And how is it that a group of gamers who know nothing about urology and nothing about medicine were able to come up with optimal solutions when they really don't know anything about the scenario? And it's because games teach gamers how to do this kind of close-ended problem solving. This problem solving where you have a particular goal and a particular set of tools, and gamers are really good at optimizing from A to Z. And that's something that they're good at in other situations too. For example, some of the gamers that I talk to are really good at things like consulting, or they're the people in their offices that their bosses go to when there's a problem. because they're recognized for their problem-solving capability. The problem, though, for a lot of you guys is that a lot of the problems, a lot of the challenges that gamers suffer from are not close-ended problems. They're what I call open-ended problems. Open-ended problems are problems that don't really have a particular sandbox. So an example of an open-ended problem is like gaining financial independence. What does that really mean? Like, how do you get financial independence? Well, it may involve certain pieces like finding a job or moving out of your parents' place or things like that, but gamers really struggle with any kind of problem that doesn't have a particular set of tools or a particular end goal. They struggle with things that are really abstract. And that's, if you think about it, a lot of the things that you're able to do in life, if someone can give you a particular goal and give you a set of tools, you're actually you're going to be able to get from point A to point Z. When gamers run into difficulty, it's because they don't really know where point Z is. They have trouble with sort of this abstract idea of financial independence because those kind of abstractions don't exist within games. And when our brain spends a lot of time playing a game, it starts to optimize working within that kind of framework, within a closed-ended framework. So a lot of the problems that gamers have tend to be things like gaining financial independence, finding a girlfriend, getting in shape. These are all sort of broad, abstract things that gamers have a lot of trouble actually executing. And the funny thing about this is that you may think that that's because gamers are not motivated, or they'll say things like, I'm lazy or I'm not motivated. But the more that I've worked with gamers, the more that I've realized that open-ended problem solving is actually a skill set that can be learned and that can be taught. And that because gamers spend so much time playing video games, they actually lose out on the opportunities to learn this kind of problem solving. I'll give you guys an example. So if I tell a 4-year-old to clean their room, that's kind of like an abstract goal. It's simple for us because we know what a clean room looks like, but a 4-year-old has a lot of trouble taking that abstract concept of a clean room, which even though they understand what a clean room looks like, they have trouble actually figuring out how to get from point A to point Z. They can tell the difference between a clean room and a dirty room, they just don't know how to move from one to the other. So what you have to do with a 4-year-old is you have to tell them, okay, let's clean the room together. So let's take all of your books and put them together and put them on the bookshelf. Let's take all your stuffed animals and put them in the stuffed animal box. And let's take all your crayons and your papers and put them in your desk drawer. You have to actually walk them through the steps of creating a clean room. They can't do that they can't take the abstract problem and break it down into pieces. And that breaking down into pieces is what I call operationalizing. So it's the process of taking an abstract problem and creating an operation of moving from point A to Z. So for example, if we wanted to operationalize, like, let's say, financial independence, we start to break that process down. So financial independence involves having a bank account where you can pay rent and having a place to live. And so what we can do is break that down into 2 pieces, and then those 2 can be further operationalized. So finding a place to live involves looking for places to live first, and then making decisions like, do I want a roommate, do I not want a roommate, do I want to live downtown or do I want to live in the suburbs? There are a lot of different pieces to each of those things, and as we break down financial independence into lots of different pieces, that's the process of operationalizing. When we're talking about the 4-year-old, when we help them, what we actually do is operationalize the problem for them. And the reason that gamers have trouble, the reason that you guys have problems, is because if you think about it, video games actually do all of the operationalizing for you. They've figured out what all of the pieces are, and so gamers are really good at putting the pieces together, but they really struggle with figuring out what the pieces are. So a lot of the problems that gamers have are, they think they're lazy and that's the reason that they don't get a job. But the more that I've worked with you guys, the more that I've realized your brain actually has not been able to operationalize that problem for you. And since you can't operationalize it, you kind of don't know where to start. So I could ask you, like, how do you find a job? And you could tell me a couple of things. But even though you're able to rationally understand that, there's a part of your brain called your frontal lobes, which does your planning, which is the part of your brain that lets you plan and execute actions, which actually gamers have frontal lobes that are sort of underdeveloped. And the reason that they have frontal lobes that are underdeveloped is because the game does that work for you. It does the process of figuring out level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5, and level 6. You don't have to figure out which order to do the levels. It's already sort of chunked up for you. And so this is why gamers sort of struggle a lot with abstract problem solving or open-ended problems, because those are the things that usually people require to move forward in life. In a little bit, we'll dig into another example of how, like another group of people, which is actually doctors, who also struggle with open-ended problem solving. And I'll show you guys that open-ended problem solving actually has nothing to do with intelligence, has nothing to do with laziness, but it's actually all a learned skill. So in the same way that we can teach the 4-year-old how to break down the abstract problem into pieces, we can actually teach you guys how to break down an abstract problem of financial independence or finding a girlfriend into pieces. And if we can transform an open-ended problem into a closed-ended problem, then your analytical mind will take over and you guys will have no problem whatsoever. Any questions?